Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. I am so excited today for our guest, Jessica Tarlov. We shall chat with Jessica in just a second. But first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening. And we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So, Jessica Tarlov joined Fox News Channel, also known as FNC, as a contributor in 2017 and serves as a rotating co-host of The Five. She also offers political analysis across FNC and Fox Business Network's programming. Prior to joining FNC, she appeared as a frequent guest on the network since 2014. In addition to her role on FNC, Jessica also serves as the Vice President of Research and Consumer Insight for Bustle Digital Group. Prior to this, she served as a senior strategist with Schoen Consulting, where she advised domestic and international clients on messaging strategies for more than 5 years and worked as a Democratic pollster. In May 2024, Jessica was named one of Variety's 2024 Women of Impact for her political commentary across Fox News Media. Jessica, welcome into the back room.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So I was digging into your bio, and I think I want to call you Dr. Tarlov. That's really PhD in government from the London School of Economics and Political Science. That's pretty impressive.
It's pretty fancy, right?
Yeah.
I don't usually talk about, I don't not talk about it, but because I don't use it on air, a lot of people don't know. But I started off in academia. I taught intro to political science at LSE for a year, which was an amazing experience. Kids from all over the world, most of whom are showing up for their freshman year at 2021 because they've done national service or taken gap years. Very much put in perspective kind of how badly we do it in the US, where everyone just goes straight in and never gets any real world experience. But that's for another podcast. But yeah, PhD and then into polling and then to where you find me. In the back room. In the back room.
All right, so we'll stick to Jessica and keep Doc aside. So in the last couple of months, we've seen Donald Trump become a convicted felon, President Joe Biden's disastrous debate performance, followed by 3 weeks of infighting with Democrats, an assassination attempt on Trump's life, Biden quitting and being replaced by Kamala Harris, who has coalesced the party around her with stunning speed and brilliance, which kind of gives new meaning to the phrase, anything can and will happen in an election year.
I think that this one will be for the record books. And I feel like everyone says that, but really once you factor in the assassination attempt, you're kind of on another planet.
Right.
And a sitting president dropping out like that and then putting his finger on the proverbial scale and just saying oh, you thought that you were having an open primary? Actually, it's Kamala and you're all going to be really happy with it. And then everyone was within 24 hours. I do think that is due as well to how well she played it and how likable she is. And something that I've been thinking a lot about and talking about is how terribly even Democrats have treated her for the last couple of years. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm nearly floored by how good she is. I'm not saying she's perfect. I'm not saying she's a Bill Clinton. But I think that we were not giving her a fair shake at all. And I don't know if that was because she was given these kind of thankless tasks from the administration, or we just spent too much time watching bad footage of interviews where she was speaking circuitously. But she has impressed me in a way that I was not prepared for.
I totally agree. I was prepared to vote for her in 2020. She dropped out early, as we all know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm a fan. And I think Hillary Clinton faced the same thing. It was sexism and, in Harris's case, racism layered over that. She's brilliant and she's very accomplished and she's extremely qualified as a candidate. And I think she was underutilized in the Biden administration. But you're right. I mean, where she's at today isn't just a fluke. It's really demonstrative of her leadership skills. I think her prosecutorial background, how she's been able to pull together a team like she's preparing for a case. And this is probably the biggest case she's ever going to prosecute. And And he, I think, has finally met a prosecutor who's going to take him down. No? I mean, that's how I see this narrative. It's kind of fascinating, very Hollywoodish in a way.
Totally. And being at the DNC, you could tell, well, besides the fact that J.J. Abrams and Jeffrey Katzenberg were walking around, you could tell that this was a Hollywood story. But I wanted to jump onto something that you said about the sexism and the racism part of this. What I think has really benefited her so well is if that's going on, if those forces are working against her, she's not getting in the mud with it.
Right.
Like Hillary Clinton's campaign, which I loved. Hillary Clinton is everything to me. And I'm forever upset that she didn't get her chance to be commander in chief. I think she would have been one of the more exceptional American presidents. But Hillary and her team decided that they wanted to fight that fight, like deal me in. Remember the woman card? They wanted to make everything about shattering glass ceilings. And Kamala Harris never talks about the fact that she's a woman. She doesn't talk about the fact that she's Black. She lets other people do it for her, like Michelle Obama, who did a masterful job in her speech, talking about the experience of someone like them, putting her and Kamala in the same bucket, coming up, brilliant lawyers, who happen to be Black. I actually loved that line more than when she said, coming for a Black job.
Right.
And I think that has really been part of the secret to Kamala's success, because these Democratic voters, a little bit like my husband, who always votes for Democrats but can't stand the identity politics of it. He's like, I just don't want to talk about this anymore. Like, I get it. It's harder for women. It's harder for people of color, but you can win on the merits and people can see you. They can process that information without you beating them over the head with it. It's kind of like what Bill Maher is always arguing. And I think Kamala has understood that assignment to a T.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think she's been so skilled at how she's addressed not only all the things you've been talking about, but how she's begun to address the critical issues that face her and the Democrats: immigration, Gaza, the economy. I mean, she started to lay out a little bit of a blueprint in her speech. And I think if she maintains those talking points and explains her positions a bit deeper, I think she's going to be able to get around those potentially controversial areas with her. But, she is, to me, the candidate at the time in history. That's how I've been seeing it. It's like she's transcending a moment in a way. Like there's something different in the air. There's something happening in this country, in the Democratic Party, even in the Republican Party, where her arrival and the way it's been rolled out, and to her credit again, how she has handled it, there's something magical. So I want to ask you about the convention. You were there. What were your biggest takeaways from it?
Well, first and foremost, how ready she is for this. I thought that she exceeded expectations, not with a speech that I found that riveting. It wasn't one of these great presidential speeches like Obama used to, like Obama at the 2004 convention, where everyone was like, I need this man in my life. It wasn't like that. It was like a prosecutor who wears a suit every day of her life. And she's like, bang, 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 bang. These are the issues. And something that Bill Kristol pointed out that I found fascinating and loved, she didn't mention the Democratic Party once in it. She talked about America. She talked about freedom. She talked about values, like all of the code words that we use, but not actually the party itself. And that was part of the appeal, obviously, to those independents, which Oprah went after, straight up said, like, I'm a political independent. This is why Kamala's our girl. But it helped her make the case as to why she was ready. So that was kind of the biggest takeaway. The second biggest takeaway for me, having been at the RNC as well, which I thought was incredibly well done, and I'm sure you were hearing this from people who went, that it was surprisingly well done. The guests obviously were not as interesting. I don't want to be rude about it. Like, they had Kid Rock and Hulk Hogan, right? It's not the same thing as Stevie Wonder and John Legend, but there was an air of inevitability about the RNC, especially considering that Trump was almost fully martyred, right? He's already a martyr to so many of his followers. And this was like it felt like the final peg or whatever the right term. I don't know. I'm bad with analogies, but it felt like this was all going their way. And then he gave a speech, which was rambling. So I thought maybe we still have a chance, but Biden was still the candidate. And so I thought, and I was someone very supportive of the president, but still understanding it was going to be a huge uphill battle with the way people felt about him. So the second takeaway was how well done it was, especially in comparison to how well the RNC had gone. And then I would say the third biggest takeaway was that it really felt like a place for every kind of Democrat to come together. So whether you were an Obama Democrat, which I think is kind of all of us in our soul a bit, or a Clinton Democrat, and people were going wild for Hillary's speech. And it was really interesting to see Gen Z women kind of get her for the first time. Like they'd heard about her as this mythical figure, for better or for worse. And seeing her up close, I talked to a bunch of younger delegates, influencers. They were blown away.
What do you think?
By Hillary. So that made...
What was it? What do you think the difference is this time?
I think that the stakes are lower for it. Like, I don't know how they would feel if she were to be the candidate. But I think that they had seen more of meme culture about her, jokes about her, also in part kind of blamed her for Trump, right? Like, this is someone who was up several points on him and technically shouldn't have lost the election. And so we got Donald Trump because Hillary lost. And for the ones who are more plugged in, I heard a lot about, well, if she would have been president if she had just gone to Wisconsin. And there are tons of reasons that Hillary ended up losing. I think the Comey letter was the largest one, but it certainly didn't help that she didn't go to Wisconsin. So it was just fascinating to see younger people in real time get to know someone that I have loved for so long. And that was very gratifying to see. But so you have the Obama Democrats, Clinton Democrats, and then this new breed, this Kamala Democrat, which is an amalgamation of all of us that just want to win, but also these moderate Republicans. Like Adam Kinzinger was a huge star, like just walking around the convention. Stephanie Grisham, these people who are Jeff Duncan, making the case that it's not anti-conservative to vote for Kamala Harris. This is a pro-democracy movement. And I think that's what's unifying everybody that's supporting Kamala right now. We want free and fair elections for the rest of time. And we know that Donald Trump will fight the results of the election 100% if he loses. And that was exciting to be part of this pro-democracy movement that was bringing people from all walks of life. And then I should say fourth, my order might be messed up, but Tim Walz blew the roof off the place. I really liked him. I kind of at first was like, should it have been Josh Shapiro? Then I understood the argument that he didn't really want to be a number two, and maybe it's too much of the same thing, right? Like two AGs, et cetera. But Tim Walz allayed everyone's fears about him. I did not come across one person who thought that there was a better choice for VP after listening to him.
I had an opportunity to go and I couldn't because I had literally everyone in my family coming to stay with me, and I much preferred that. But what do we not see at home that folks like you who were there are able to see and experience? Like, we can sort of glean the electricity, the fever.
Yeah.
But I would imagine when you are there, you mentioned like Hillary's speech and people went crazy, and I saw people go nuts over other speeches. But that doesn't really come through the TV the same way. What is it like to be in that room?
Well, it creates, to use the overused term of community, it creates community on a level that you can't even find when you go to a professional sporting event, because a quarter of the people in there might be coming from the other team, right? They might have gotten on a plane and flown to Phoenix to see the game or wherever it is. This was like everybody is on the same jersey here. And it's funny, I'm someone, maybe to my detriment, but I do like to look to others for affirmation of what I'm feeling.
Mm.
I'm just like, oh, are you loving this too? It like annoys my husband in the movies. I'm like, oh my, what are you thinking? He's like, don't talk in the movies. But what was cool at the DNC is I'm looking around and everybody is feeling what I'm feeling, especially during like a big speech, like Michelle Obama's speech, which I actually preferred to President Obama's speech. Personally, I just thought that she nailed it. And I actually hadn't seen either of them live. So that was really cool. But it's also awesome when someone is speaking that people are getting to know, like Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. So you could tell everyone was as engaged, but there were also these looks of wonderment. Like, who is this guy? Like, I didn't know that we had, like his veteran story, what he's accomplished in Maryland, that he started out with the bridge breaking and honoring people who are here undocumented that are doing these jobs and risking their lives for us. You could see it clicking for people with Gretchen Whitmer as well. And then, I mean, I'm a big crier in general, but when you're watching like the gun violence segment, that everyone is welling up with you. It's community on another level. And the same in the segment about abortion, which I thought that they were absolutely brilliant to have the husband speak first, to really contextualize this as it's not just a woman problem. This is a family problem when people are prohibited from being able to have reproductive health care. So I don't know if you got that, but that was what was most special about being in the room for me.
Yeah, I was able to get that for sure. And those moments that you just mentioned about the gun violence videos and Hadley's story on sexual abuse, stuff like that. The thing I wish I was there for was I loved how the party seems to be taking back all the things that were robbed from us.
Oh,
the flag,
all the patriotism,
USA, 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 faith, family, the military. I mean, it's nothing short of stunning to me how quickly the Democratic Party has recaptured all of these things that we were on the sidelines for. Like, we are now the strong pro-democracy, pro-national security, pro-law and order, pro-family values. That was, to me, the biggest thing that I took away. And it's amazing to see.
Yeah, it was definitely there in the room. And it felt akin to 2018. Remember when we had the camo wave in the House? When we got, like, Mikey Sherrill and Jason Crow and Elisa Slotkin. And that was a moment where we did kind of stand up and said, like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
We actually serve in higher numbers in elected office.
That's right.
But it was interesting because I came back, I flew back Friday morning and I did the 5 from New York City. And I brought this up. I said, there were more American flags for the DNC than the RNC. Plain and simple. That's the way it was. And everyone, piled on, which is usual. But it makes you think, like, we're living in this moment, but how does it transfer to votes? We have someone like a Harry Dunn, who was at the Capitol on January 6th. You have an Adam Kinzinger, et cetera. But are we going to be able to really cut into these big, substantial leads with law enforcement? And not people at the higher echelons, right? Like the street cops, or people who are serving in the army. Like today, for instance, Donald Trump is at Arlington Cemetery, honoring the 13 people who died, service members who died during when we withdrew from Afghanistan. Joe Biden is in Delaware, and Kamala Harris isn't there. I don't know where she is now. I'm not saying that this means we don't care and they care, but those moments are perfect fodder for the Republicans, and they really know how to weaponize them. And that's always what concerns me. I'm not saying it's how I feel about it. I'm just saying that Trump is very good at showing up for those kinds of things. Well, it spreads like wildfire.
He's good at theater and he's good at optics, but he's also good at calling those very same people suckers and losers. So your point is very well taken.
I agree.
So the question is, which one of those narratives, pro-military Trump who's honoring the dead, or suckers and losers Trump, will eventually win out amongst the key voters in the swing states who this is really all about on November 5th.
Yep.
But you're right. And it makes you wonder, why aren't the other two there? Like in this kind of an election year, I'm no James Carville, but to me, I'd be like, he's there, you got to go. Right? Simple.
Right. Like, as long as he's not going to a brothel, like, go with him,
Exactly.
right? Just show up everywhere, because he can't stand the trolling either.
Right.
Like, that would get him, and he would probably do something insane again, like say something terrible or be rude to someone if you goad him into it. It also just, if you look at President Biden's favorability, it took a dive during the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which everyone agrees we should have done. But the approach to it was a little haphazard, and it happened too fast. But it took a nosedive there, and it has never recovered. It's crazy that you can isolate like one event that changed how people feel about his presidency. And so this feels like a gimme to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand you're on vacation. You deserve a vacation. I thought he did a great job on Monday night when he came and kind of handed it over to Kamala. But I would have loved to see him there, if only in my own self-interest, because I have to go to work tomorrow and they're going to bring it up. And what am I going to say? He's at the beach.
Well, this, Well, does this speak to the larger issue or the larger problem that Democrats have had over the years where, decades ago they started losing the Southern Democrats, the working class? Like, is there some bit of arrogance and perhaps even delusion? Like, we don't have to go. We didn't have to go. I mean, because how else would you explain the campaign not going? Like, why let him grab that spotlight, especially when he calls them suckers and losers? So it's like, are we doing the same thing again in this party? Are we ignoring a lot of the shit that really matters to the people who are going to count in this election because we think we're giving them what they really want and need? Is there a disconnect again still?
I do think there is a disconnect, and I am also very aware of the fact that I exist in a very different environment than most Democrats, that I work in conservative media. So I am always seeing things through a vantage point that is a little bit different from ours. But I think that there is this almost fear. It's certainly a refusal, but some degree of fear of getting in the mud with him about these things, because we shouldn't have to. And I'm not talking about necessarily the Arlington Cemetery thing, because that's not muddy. That's actually honoring people who died for our country. And I think you should always do that. But, when he says, jump, and then we're like, well, why should we say, how high? Right? Like, this guy is out of his mind. He doesn't deserve to have been president once, certainly not to have been president again. Suckers and losers, 34 convictions, sexual abuse, all of it. Right? Like, how does this make somebody that people connect to? But the reality is that it does. And if you don't meet him where he is sometimes, not all the time, but just sometimes, you come off as taking it for granted. Like, I'm not going to go to Wisconsin when I'm Hillary Clinton.
Exactly.
And it does not seem like Kamala and Tim Walz are following that example at all. I mean, they have been doing everything, and twice on Sunday. Or you say Saturday or Sunday? I don't know.
Sunday.
But Sunday, good. And it does worry me. We are increasingly, even if you look across minority voters, we are becoming the party of college elites. Even like, I was looking at a new breakdown. There's a poll of Black voters, and the split is now emerging within that group as well. That people who have gone to college and women are unequivocally for the Democrats. And he's still pulling in 16 to 19% of Black men, and most of them who haven't gone to college. And I have a friend named Antoine Seawright, who's a consultant. He works for like Clyburn and Hakeem Jeffries, a lot of work with the Congressional Black Caucus. And he does all of these focus groups with Black men. He goes to barber shops all over the country talking to people. And what he hears over and over again is, I don't know what they've done for me. Like, no one tells me in plain terms what the Democratic Party has done for me. And so this is something that my friend obviously raises with people in positions of power. It's something that Hakeem Jeffries understands or Jim Clyburn understands, but I'm not sure if the apparatus all the way up to the top really gets it, because, we can pull in all of the, white, moderate Republican women who live in the suburbs outside Atlanta or outside Phoenix, et cetera. But if he pulls 19% of Black men, we're going to be in a little bit of trouble.
Exactly.
It's not Black women will always be with us, it seems like. But too often it feels like a gimme. Like, well, I got this, so I don't need that. And Biden proved that theory wrong because he got such a higher percentage of white working class voters because of the Scranton Joe thing. And I don't think we know yet if Kamala appeals in that same way, if she, her middle class upbringing translates like Scranton Joe did.
Yeah, or like Minnesota Tim. He's got the bona
100%
fides in the Midwest, but she's going to have to make it in the heartland, the Rust Belt, and the South. And I'm concerned about that. And I really appreciate what you're saying about working in a conservative environment, because that's kind of how I try to approach things. I have a lot of conservatives on this podcast. I appreciate understanding the other side, even if I don't agree with it. And I also am able to be critical of my party. So this Arlington thing to me is an example of something that I worry about. I mean, look, I share in the euphoria, and Democrats are giddy. I mean, they're drunk on euphoria right now.
We needed it. It's
yes, and I share it. Trust me, I wake up every day euphoric. Yeah. But it's like one eye and one ear on the euphoria, and another eye and another ear on, is this going to translate to anything really meaningful on November 5th? Right. And so when I see these little, unforced errors being made, like, I can hear Trump at the next rally going, they say they're for the military, but I went to Arlington and they didn't. Where was she? And nobody's going to remember suckers and losers. It's just, and that's going to get the media attention. And so I worry about that. Do you have any words of caution for Democrats amidst the euphoria?
Well, one thing that was great is I did not come across a single person at the DNC who thought this was in the bag. Everybody is just excited to have a puncher's chance. And right after Biden dropped out and the candidate became Kamala, I was talking about this on the 5. And I said, what you are experiencing and what this campaign will be for the next, I think it was like 102 days when this started, is that we have a fighting chance. And if we're going to go down, we want to go down swinging. And people did not feel like Biden on the top of the ticket was us putting our best foot forward, that we were going down swinging. And if people feel that way, the Electoral College, not good for Democrats, right? I mean, she has to run up 4 to 6, she has to be 4 to 6 points ahead in order for that to all fall into place. And it's great that now the Sun Belt is in play. I loved that Roy Cooper introduced her and was the last one to go. People feel very strongly that North Carolina is in play for us. And certainly the gubernatorial candidate on the Republican side is helping us out there. But, it is going to be a slog. It is going to be a battle until November 7th, probably, when this actually gets called. And I don't want to come across anyone who is anything but cautiously optimistic, because that's all that we deserve at this point. And, a lot of people like to denigrate Trump, like he's a buffoon. And I fall into it too. I listen to him talking about electrocuting sharks and Hannibal Lecter or whatever it is. And I'm like, this guy's an idiot. Guy's not an idiot. And he has a lot of really smart people who are very heavily invested in this, who stand to make a shit ton of money if he ends up the guy. And, we have to be super careful about it. I think that Kamala, and I should have put this in my list of big takeaways, I thought her foreign policy section was unbelievable. And I was seeing people saying John McCain could have delivered that, which is absolutely perfect for us. And I don't know about you, and we have, offline talked a lot about the Israel and Gaza situation. I got a flood of texts from Jewish friends that were like, I'm in. Like, she did it. She said exactly what I needed to hear. to satisfy someone that is concerned with the safety and security of Israel, but also wants the Palestinians to have a good quality of life and for this to stop. And I think that will be a major feather in her cap in going into this, because, the way Trump talks about Israel is repulsive to a majority of, Democratic Jews, but he has brought in millions and millions and millions of dollars because of that stance that people just, say, well, I think they're saying I want a tax break, but they're saying he's going to be better for Israel. And I think she could prove them wrong if it's executed properly. But that's another way that he's going to keep going and hammering us. It'll be Arlington ceremony. It'll be, they listen to the protesters, right? Like,
yeah. Well, the thing is, they'll do all of those things regardless. That's the beauty of Trump, is that it doesn't matter what you do. So just everybody's got to do what they got to do regardless of the politics, because they're going to be accused of everything, whether it's true or not anyway.
100%. Yeah. But we actually care about our ethics, which is part of it's our blessing and our curse that Democrats do. We don't want to be thought of that way. And there is respect for rule of law and the procedure of things, like, like Merrick Garland, right? What Mitch McConnell did, I don't know if Harry Reid would have done or Chuck Schumer would have done it, because it's so ruthless and it's so disgusting. And you know what he's done? He's guaranteed a conservative court for the next 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Well, you're right about Trump being, I think he's an evil genius, and no one should ever discount him or the party. But in our final couple of minutes here, I want to ask you about Mr. Teddy Bear Brainworm, that whole situation. I mean, I don't...
Crazy.
Am I crazy to think that Trump, in the absence of media attention, amid all his frustration and his anger over all the momentum that Kamala Harris has and the Democrats have, that he has to do something desperate to shake shit up? And I think the first thing he's going to do is shit can J.D. Vance, because he's not going to blame himself. He's got to blame somebody for this campaign imploding. But now I'm thinking, not only is he going to shit can J.D. Vance, but he's going to replace him with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. And I yesterday saw a Trump logo that it had Trump in big letters, Vance in mini letters, and then Kennedy in big letters right below it. I don't know how the procedure works to actually get him formally off the ticket, but I think that Trump will behave as if Bobby Kennedy is his running mate. And I think that is a big benefit to us, because Bobby Kennedy has a lot of weird things obviously going on. And I actually didn't know that new anecdote about the whale head strapped to the top of his car, leaking whale juice on his children, that he chainsawed on the beach. And I didn't know that he had detailed all the sexual exploits with 37 different women in a year. And in that way, I can actually see why they connect, because they're both obviously such insane narcissists.
Yes.
I'm not a cheating man, but I definitely wouldn't document it in such lurid detail and then leave it around so that my wife could find it and eventually drive her to suicide. So all of those things are going to be front and center in the campaign. And now you will have two people who are so morally bankrupt. And I think that is an opportunity for us to be able to exploit. Like J.D. Vance, he's just not ready for the moment. He is too fresh off of saying that Trump is maybe America's Hitler. He doesn't know how to talk to anyone, let alone someone that works in a donut shop. But I can't make the argument that J.D. Vance is morally bankrupt, right? Like he's been with his wife since law school. He has 3 kids who he seemingly likes. Now we have a philanderer ticket. And there's this incredible guy named Doug Patchett who runs something called Vote Common Good. And he is an evangelical preacher who left working to try to campaign to switch voters over, focusing mostly on Michigan, to vote for Democrats, where 80% of the evangelical vote went for Trump in 2016, and he got it down to 71% in 2020. So people like Doug Padgett are looking at the ascension of Bobby Kennedy on that side and thinking this is our opportunity. Because who in good conscience, if you call yourself an evangelical, can go for this? And it's bringing into question the pro-life bona fides. I mean, Trump has already started truth socialing, I'm great for women's reproductive freedom. And I've seen people like Allie Beth Stuckey, who's a conservative commentator. And there's actually, I don't know if you saw the incredible piece in The Atlantic about her, comparing her to Phyllis Schlafly, someone who has the long-term eye on the prize for the conservative movement. And Allie Beth Stuckey is tweeting like, what the F is this? Right? Like, you're bringing someone on who is openly pro-choice. It's not even someone who thinks that there should be, a federal protection. You're like someone who doesn't believe in restrictions at all. And I think that could be a major turnoff for people. So I welcome it. It's going to make this a very strange race. But I think that the Republicans underestimate how smart the Democratic voter is, because they keep saying, well, he's a Kennedy. That's not a real Kennedy.
Right.
That's like not anyone that thinks it's Camelot-y, and for the folks that want to buy into the censorship argument and the Democratic Party does this and we just, toss someone out if they don't agree with us a little. It's like Bobby Kennedy doesn't agree with us at all, besides, I guess, being formally pro-choice. And I'm sure that this is very painful for his family to have to speak about him this way, but he seems like a very sick person.
Yeah, well, I haven't read it yet, but apparently Max Kennedy, his brother, just penned a scathing op-ed like in the last 24 hours or so. Yeah, no, you're right. And
sure.
the real Kennedys, to your point, dozens of them have, as we know, have come out against him for the last several years. And he's not a real Kennedy. They take away the Kennedy name, and there's nothing that resembles anything about that family or what they've done for many decades. My last question to you is not a political question, and maybe even one that you've not been asked before, ever. It is a window into the soul question. And music is the best window into the soul. So give me either your top 5 musical artists of all time or all the people you love listening to.
Well, I feel like, and this is such a lame woman response, I feel like I've been taken over. My husband cares deeply. And so the controls of life have been handed over to him more. So I will have to say that I might not like it, but I consume more Grateful Dead music than I ever hoped. And when you asked about the feeling in the arena during the DNC, he was just out at the Sphere in Vegas to see the Dead. And he described something very similar to being at the DNC, probably with more hallucinogenics. But if I was in control, I really I'm like a very much like an elder millennial pop kind of girl. I love all of that, like that I would have listened to on Z100. I will always listen to the Beatles and Elton John. I grew up with that. That was what was going in the car when we would go on road trips, like, in the station wagon with mom, still smoking. Though she always says, I did stop while I was pregnant. I'm like, well, thanks a lot. That's given me a big lease on life. I love taiko. I don't know if you ever listened to taiko. I find it very zen. And it's just, it's great calming music. I'm listening to a lot of kid stuff right now, which no one wants to go and listen to the soundtrack from Trolls, but it's fantastic. I don't know how many things I've said now. I saw the Stones perform in Hyde Park, which was one of the more incredible experiences. So I'm putting them on the list. And if I love Eminem, like old Eminem.
Slim Shady.
I don't know what kind of portrait this is painting.
No,
of me,
I was going to say you and I have, aside from Trolls, you and I kind of have the same music tastes.
Because you're out of the troll space.
Yeah, I'm out of the troll space.
In it.
Yeah, I'm more like Laurie Berkner and Rafi, because my kids were little.
I had that growing up.
A couple decades ago. Look, you mentioned Brian a couple of times, so I know Brian. So one of the reasons I love you is because you have a great sense of humor. So you tweeted the other day about Kirsten and Doug Emhoff. And you said, said, I hope to never get divorced, but if God forbid it happens. What an example these two have set. Just amazing. I don't know how that played at home, but
I realized I got nailed in the comments because people were like, well, is your husband doing it with the nanny? And I was like, oh, yeah, right. Good point. But Brian's colleague messaged him and was like, FYI, your wife is talking about divorce on the internet. So that's how he was alerted to it. But I do think it's an incredible example. And I thought that Doug Emhoff did a fabulous job at the DNC. And one of the themes that I mentioned on the 5 was that the DNC was really about holding up women and all of these alpha males being comfortable enough to backing up their ladies. Mm-hmm. And like Doug Emhoff is a huge success in his own right. I mean, a celebrity attorney, making tons of money. And like the most exciting thing that's ever happened to him besides having his kids seems to be being Kamala Harris's fanboy. And I just love it.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have cheated. For everyone who saw my tweet, I get it. It's really bad. Infidelity is bad. No.
Hey, look, we got to have some humor in this world. Otherwise, we're going to go crazy. Jessica, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on. And I hope you'll come back and talk with me again. Take care.
Absolutely. And I'll see you around the hood.
Yep, you will. Bye-bye. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.